Manny Navarro of The Athletic joins me today to talk a little bit about one of the bigger week one games, certainly the biggest week one game in the state of Florida. Miami goes to the Swamp. What concerns do you have around Cam Ward playing that very first game, no tune up, on the road in the Swamp in front of 90,000 people?
Everything you just described, the fact that it will be in the swamp and that it will be hot as hell on August 31st, and the humidity will be disgusting, and all of us will be complaining about how hot and nasty it is outside. And you still have to face an SEC roster, even if Billy Napier is on the hot seat and struggling and really fighting for his job this year. I think, look, the Gators. You look at the game with Florida State last year; it was competitive, as good as I think Miami is going to be this year to play Game One on the road against an SEC opponent. It's been a long time since Miami's gone on the road and opened the season with a win over an SEC opponent. So for all those reasons, I think that's why I'm worried.
Um, I'll tell you what else I don't like. Not that I didn't put this in the notes. Is I don't like that their press box is not in the AC. It's not
Yeah.
so bad in
Yes.
November when we play them. It's usually really nice, and
Yeah.
it sounds awful in
It
Gainesville
is.
in
It is. It
August.
is
So
going to be
yeah,
awful.
Godspeed to you for that one. I don't mind it late in the year, but ugh. Mario and Napier, similar records at both their programs. Through 2 years, both coaches have had some blunders for sure. Is there a coaching edge in this game?
It's a great question. I think I look at the coordinators, right? And I say, who's done the best job of the four in this game? And I give the edge to Lance Guidry because I think he is a guy. Miami's defense last year took a drastic step up, and they did it in the second half of the season with limited defensive linemen because of some of the injuries that they had. And he went with a 3-3-5 stack, and Miami still played, I thought, really good defense down the stretch. And I can't say the same thing for Florida, Florida's offensive and defensive coordinators, and even Miami's offensive coordinator. I just think if you were to say who's the best of the four, I'd give the edge to Lance Guidry and say I think he's the best X's and O's guy in this game. That's not to say that those guys make all the difference. The talent still will make all the difference. I say winning in college football is 90%, Jerry's and Joe's and who's playing quarterback, and 10% your coach is losing you the game. I think in this instance, Miami's Jerry's and Joe's and quarterback are probably better than Florida's, and that's why I'd give them the edge. But again, you're playing this game on the swamp, in nastiness, and it's the first game of the year, so anything can happen.
Yeah. Guidry gets the edge without even having a toolbox like does. The trenches are certainly, use all the cliches here, I guess, but the trenches are certainly where games are won and lost. I mean, I like Miami's offensive line a lot. I have some concerns around UF's offensive line, and I think Miami's defensive line, probably edges them out too. Am I reading that right? I mean, does Miami probably have the advantage on both sides of the line of scrimmage?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, look, Florida's got, I think, one of the transfers that came in who's 37 career starts. It's Brandon Crenshaw Dixon, as I'm sitting here going through all my off-season notes just because I've got all this homework done. So people don't know I'm just pulling this out of my butt. He's from San Diego State, third team all-conference player. I guess he's slotted in to be one of the new five. Devin Manuel, a transfer from Arkansas, could be another one. But they basically got three starters back, and I don't think any of them are necessarily elite. They're just guys. I watched that Florida-Georgia game in person. I went up to Jacksonville to see that game, and that's really where I think the difference between Florida and elite teams is. They just don't have the dudes up front on the offensive line. They didn't get enough of a push against Georgia. Obviously, I think Florida State, you go back to that game last year, same thing. Florida State was beating them, I think, up front pretty consistently. And then, you look at the Gators defensive line, it's the same sort of story. They've got some guys that are veterans, Cam Jackson, Tyreek Sapp, Caleb Banks. They just don't have a lot of depth. And I think Miami has so much more depth on its defensive line with some of the guys that they picked up in the portal I think Mario, that's one area that you have to give him sort of credit, is he identified an area where he hasn't necessarily been able to address through recruiting yet. Most of their elite guys just got to Miami. They're part of the 24 class on the defensive line. But he went out and he got CJ Clark, who was a solid starter for NC State. He got Marley Cook, another solid guy at Middle Tennessee. Elijah Alston, sort of an elite edge guy. Simeon Barrow, who started 30 games at Michigan State. And then Tyler Barron, a transfer from Tennessee, I think, who had 6.5 sacks last year. So, I mean, you go out and you get all these guys that have played a ton and have been a part of rotation, and now you go 7, 8 deep on your defensive line. And so I think, yes, you identified the right area where Miami is better than Florida.
I really like the skill guys on both teams.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about Martinez in another episode. You mentioned Restrepo and some of the wide receivers. I like Montreal Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
I think that not having ETN there is a bigger deal than they're making it out to be. Maybe their beat or fan base or whatever. Because I think just being the second guy is a little easier when ETN takes a lot of that load off. But I do like Montreal Johnson. I like Eugene Wilson. Is really good. I like some of the transfers they brought in. So I don't know if the skill positions are even. I'd probably lean slightly Miami's way there too. But I do, even if you just said like they're even enough, I do kind of wonder with both secondaries, right? I think there are questions for both of them, like who maybe has the edge there and can limit some of those skill guys on the other side. Because I think both skill guys are, I could see this being high scoring. I could see both teams kind of getting some points off. But which secondary can play slightly better in coverage and not give up some of those big plays?
Yeah, I think, look, you look at Florida, I would give Florida the edge there because that is Miami's weakness, as we mentioned. That is an area where I think you need some young guys to step up and provide some depth. And Florida's deeper there. You got Jason Marshall back, who feels like he's been there for 20 years. You got Asa Turner out of the transfer portal at safety, a guy who has 28 career starts. Chiqueezy Bridges, an Oregon transfer. I mean, they went out and they addressed Jordan Castile, who's I thought their best player on defense last year at safety. So their secondary to me is deeper. They did go out and pick up Cormani McLean, who I think that's a fascinating topic all on its own. So there's guys that can contribute. DJ Douglas, a Tulane transfer, a guy who I think has 13 starts in his career. So I think Florida's secondary is deeper, but I think Miami's pass rush is better. And I think in a lot of ways, you're only as good as your pass rush in college football. It's how quickly can you get to that quarterback and disrupt them and make them uncomfortable. Florida's guys, it's not going to be easy to cover, 3 800-yard receivers from a year ago.
Yeah, I think Florida had some, like in Power 5 games last year, like Florida's sack numbers are like the lowest in the Power 5. And so if you're not getting after Ward, those guys can't cover for 6 seconds. Like I don't care if it's, you had 4 Deons out there, like you can't do it forever. Vegas slightly favors Miami. I've gone pretty back and forth on this, and I think the path to a Miami win is slightly more realistic, but I do expect it to be close, and weird things have happened in the Swamp, especially early in the year. I mean, they upset Utah early in the year. They upset Tennessee earlier in the year, and I don't know that they should have won either one of those games the last couple of years, but it seemed like the Swamp made a pretty big difference there. And, I expect it to be close. Like I don't necessarily see either team running away with it, but Vegas slightly favors Miami. I think I slightly favor Miami. Do you have an early score prediction as we're like a month out?
Yeah, I could see this being a 31-24 type game. Miami winning by a touchdown. I think you look at Cam Ward. I think if Miami was going into this with a young quarterback, I'd be picking the Gators to win. The fact that Cam Ward has played as much football as he has and the effect that he has in that locker room, it elevates guys around him. You look back at last season, Miami got off to a 4-0 start. They beat a pretty decent Texas A&M team, their first win over an SEC team in a long time. And the majority of those guys are back on this team, the guys that were a part of that win. And so to me, I don't think Miami is going to be fazed by the environment. I think the fact that they've got a proven quarterback should calm things down week one and get them to win.
Manny, where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work?
Yeah, you can read me at The Athletic, and you can follow me on Twitter at Manny_Navarro. And I've also got a podcast, the Wide Right Pod, available everywhere you download your podcast, and as well as the YouTube. You can look up Wide Ride Pod there and find me there.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.
No problem.